So hello and welcome. Happy Friday. Today is Friday, November the 5th, and this is Backyard Beekeeping Questions and Answers, episode number 132. I'm Frederick Dunn, and this is The Way to Bee. So if you want to know what we're going to talk about today, please look down in the video description below, and you'll see everything by topic in order, and then you'll see how that goes. So it's cold and snowy outside this morning. Everything's turned for the worse. It is 39 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 4 Celsius. But we have a promise of getting warmer weather coming back up soon, so we might still be able to do some things for the bees. I don't know, we're going to see how that goes. And the other thing I want to see about is we have those cosmos flowers that are still in bloom and still have buds yet to bloom. So I went out this morning with my video gear and took videos of those because the blossoms are still open and covered by snow. So what I want to find out is when the temperature comes back up, potentially into the 60s again in the coming 5 days or so, then we're going to find out, are they finished? Did that just do them in? Or are they still blossoming and do those buds still continue? So I don't know. If you have cosmos where you are and you endure snow and frost and all those negative weather impacts on the flower, let me know down below. If you have questions, write them down in the comment section below or go to thewaytobee.org and fill out the form. And then you'll be able to submit a question, potentially, to have your question addressed next Friday. So let's jump right into it. The first question comes from Kathleen. She says that I'm using bee cozies for winter and an uninsulated outer cover. That's key, by the way. Closing up the screen bottom board, the instructions call for an upper entrance. I'd love your advice on this. I'm a first-year beekeeper. This will be my first winter with 2 hives that are both in single, deep, 10-frame Langstroths. I'm in north-central Massachusetts. Okay, so here's the thing. Something is key about this question, and that's why I wanted my beekeeping friends out there to know about it. If you're going to insulate your hives, there's nothing wrong with the bee cozy, by the way. So if you want to get a bee wrap that, insulates your hives and wraps around the sides. But what really stood out for me here is using bee cozies for it says an insulated outer cover. So that is what you want, but here's the thing. Whatever the insulation level is on your hives, make sure that the top of your hive, the inner cover, the outer cover, and so on, is the most insulated. And then the secondary insulation would be the sidewalls going down below the cover. And so I get away with most of the hives anyway. Some of my hives, the long Langstroth hive has thick wood material, it's an 1.5 inches thick, which is only like an R2.3 or something for pine. Your normal beehive sidewalls, 3/4 of an inch, a little over an R factor of 1. So really insignificant insulation. So really what your beehives do is protect your bees from wind. Hopefully the joints between the boxes are well sealed and you don't have to worry about wind cutting in and ruining that warm air pocket that the bees develop in the upper sides of your beehives, upper inside. So if you're going to insulate the top. If you insulate the sides, make sure the top is more insulated than the sides, so that if there's a cool interior surface, it happens on the walls, hopefully further down the sidewall so the bees can benefit from the condensation that forms there. So the thing about the upper entrance, I don't use them anymore at all. I don't use upper vents anymore at all. And so I have another video that's going to come out maybe even later tonight or tomorrow that shows what I did with one of those Bee Smart Designs insulated inner covers. I made another video to show how I modified it and made a warmer cover, but also provided a space to hopefully raise the temperature of the food resources that we put up there, and I'll explain that in that video also. But both single deep, 10 frames, north central. Okay, so the thing is, I get rid of the upper vent. I get rid of the upper entrance, and there's a whole pile of science backing up that method, including Dr. Seeley right now. So we can look into Dr. Seeley's Darwinian beekeeping approach, which, by the way, I've mentioned this before when I give presentations. This is not beneficial for those that are hoping to yield a lot of resources and income from your beehive. So the methods that I've adopted for my backyard beekeeping are really going to be just for keeping bees with moderate gains in surplus honey and things like that. Because I'm sticking to a 2 to 3 max beehive box configuration. Single deep, 1 medium to 2 mediums if the colony really gets big and out of hand, but more than likely 1 deep with 1 medium as the maximum size of the box. So you end up with smaller colonies. We don't force feed them, we don't push them, we don't get their populations going as people who need to yield an income from their bees might do. So keep in mind, backyard beekeeping, we're keeping the bees for the fun of keeping the bees and hopefully going into winter and keeping them alive. And insulation, no upper entrance, no upper venting is part of that now. And it worked really well last winter when a lot of people lost a lot of honeybees. So next question, number 2, comes from Ralph, who lives in Livonia, New York. Can I treat with oxalic acid when sugar cakes are in the hive? So oxalic acid, first of all, for those of you who don't know, it's our number 1 culprit when it comes to managing honeybees today, unless you live in Australia. And that is the Varroa destructor mite, and we all need to get rid of them, right? So what he's talking about is oxalic acid vaporization, which is what we treat our bees with in order to kill the Varroa destructor mites. And just recently, over the past year, by the way, it was approved to be used here in the United States for treatment as a miticide, even with Honey Supers on. But here's the thing, state by state, Department of Agriculture controls that, so you have to find out what the regulations are within your own state. But the question is, this time of year, can I treat with oxalic acid with sugar cakes on? So sugar cakes are on as a solid sucrose resource to give your bees a carbohydrate energy going into winter. It's solid now instead of liquid because we don't want to be contributing moisture inside the beehive this time of year. The bees are going to be contributing a lot of moisture on their own, and even when they consume honey, they generate moisture. We're going to talk about that a little more today too, but it's absolutely okay to treat with your sugar cakes on the hive. Why would I say that? Because even in the worst case scenario, okay, because we've already drawn off any honey, surplus honey that you're going to, so everything that's in your hives this time of year, in the month of November, is for the bees. So it's not harmful to them. And the concern, of course, with oxalic is for some people that it might get into the honey. Well, let me tell you what. Oxalic acid is present in all honey. So the levels wouldn't show up. But the other thing is when you're giving them a solid sugar block, sugar brick, if you're using fondant and things like that, that does not make its way into stored honey because this time of year, they're only moistening those block forms of sugar and carbohydrate for direct consumption. They're not going to liquefy that, carry it in their crop, and then store it in cells this time of year. So you're pretty safe. That's good to go. That was question number 2. Now we're going on to question number 3 from Randy Parker. On the flow hives that I use to roll up screens as entrance reducers, do you remove the screens during winter and use a solid reducer? Half and half, because part of what I do is I want to see what the bees are doing. When it comes to the screen and the entrance, and keep in mind, remember that for me, the only entrance to the hive and the only vent in the hive is that front entrance down at the bottom of your brood box. So when it comes to flow hives, the screen is a way of reducing the entrance. So it's just rolled aluminum screen, by the way, because aluminum holds its shape. Once you roll it and crimp it and push it in there, then it's going to hold its position unless a skunk or something comes along and tries to pull it out. So what it does is creates a physical barrier, so wasps and robber bees, by the way, don't relax about honeybees robbing each other out yet. Because now when we get these warm-ups that are coming up, we're going to have a surplus of foragers and nothing to forage upon. Therefore, they're going to be putting stress on other colonies. And if there's a weak spot or a big opening, they have a chance to get in and rob them out at the worst possible time of year for the colony that gets robbed. So rolled screens allow things to vent. They don't disrupt that upper warm cavity at the top of the hive that we're trying to keep so that the bees can stay warm during winter. Lots of reasons that why we want that. And so you have the option to reduce it or leave the screen there, but have that minimal opening, and you can leave the screens in, or you can replace them with wooden shims that just match that opening. But the screens are easy to do. And yes, you can leave them, so it's completely up to the beekeeper. Question number 4, JBW. Sounds almost like JB Weld, JBW. Anyway, Mr. Don, I'm a newbie. This is my 2nd year. Lost my first hive while gone on vacation. Swarmed, I guess. Bought another nuke, and it is doing well. Hoping for another come spring. I've read books, watched thousands of videos, took the course from the Flow Hive folks. I have one of the round in-hive feeders, but it drowns bees. After the first round of dead bees, I thought maybe they don't have anything to keep them out of the syrup. Fill it with stones of varying sizes and textures, but still lost bees. I tried another type that holds syrup that is let down into a tray underneath. Still lost bees, but not as many. What am I doing wrong? Or do I have dumb bees? I have 2 entrance feeders, but they seem to attract robbers. Help. Okay, so yeah, entrance feeders, I'm not a fan of them across the board, because you're right, and especially this time of year. Entrance feeders, for those of you who don't know, bottom of the hive over here, down at the entrance, you'll have a feeder that slips in, and usually it has like a mason jar or something like that on it. Convenient for the beekeeper. Push it right in the front. It's right there. The bees can get it. But the bad news is robbers get in, and all you need is for a couple of foraging honeybees to get in there, get a taste of some syrup, and get out and get back to their colony. Then you've got a gold rush on your hands, and it's a huge problem. So no hive front feeders. Again, you can talk to other beekeepers that'll tell you that they're the best things ever. I'm just sharing, what I've learned and what I know and what I don't do. So then the other thing is, people get really concerned when you have, and the type of round feeder we're talking about, this gets talked about on my channel constantly. Oops. Rapid round feeder, this is what it is. Hole in the bottom, sits on top of your inner cover. Feed goes in here. If it's syrup, you've got this protective clear cover that keeps the bees from going out. So kind of one of the things I had problems visualizing is JBW says fill this up with gravel and things like that to keep the bees from drowning. But if you fill this cavity with gravel, first of all, very hard to do, and then still close it down. But how do the bees then get to the bottom to take up the syrup as it gets all the way to the bottom? So sometimes you're going to find a few dead bees. People panic and think things absolutely aren't working if they find a couple of dead bees. But what I want to explain is when there's feed that's constantly available in one of these, usually that's early spring or after the nectar flow. After you've taken your honey off, you've got a weak colony, you want to keep feeding them or something like that. Keeping the feed constantly available is key, because if they start feeding, they find the resource up here, and you get a few bees up there, and they're all cooperating, they're all doing great, and they're getting their feed, and then they're going back down, and there's it's casual. But then you let that feed run out, and then you'll see that inside of this, it'll be full of bees. Sometimes they'll get under it, and they'll get out here in the open. So then what happens is you come around with your jug of syrup and you look in there, oh, it's empty, and then you fill it back up. Now there's a rush on the feed. And if you've ever seen honeybees at feeders, they are not polite to each other. They pile on each other, they shove each other in it, and they're merciless in their desperate attempts to gain resources for their own colony. And even within the same colony, they don't care about their own sisters and half-sisters. So we have full sisters and half-sisters inside the same colony of bees, and they pile up, each of them are all trying to get in here, get the syrup, and so they're pushing each other into it. Now the thinner syrups, which are 1-to-1, generally, these are not critical, by the way. But on a 1-to-1 syrup, bees have a tendency to get in it, get wet, and then they can climb right back out. They have a pretty good chance of getting out, and they use each other's bodies to climb out once they're covered in syrup. The heavier syrups, the 2-to-1 syrups that are almost the consistency of honey itself, those are the ones that bees have a very hard time getting out of. So there are other styles of feeders, although these are my favorite just because they're so convenient. put it right there, and it can stay right there. Plus, it can feed dry or liquid. And since we're making that conversion to dry syrup this time of year, it's handy to have the same kind of feeder. But I'm going to show you another feeder. This is the Bee Smart Designs tank that never drowns a bee. But sometimes what it can do, and look at this modification, right? I went nuts with it. See all these little shims and spacers around that connection, and of course it feeds through these little holes in the bottom. There's a couple of designs. The new one is the 3-season feeder, it's called. So for example, you know, you're going to hear it across the board, everybody's saying no liquid feed, and that's true. So this time of year we're trying to limit the amount of moisture inside the hive, so liquid feeds contribute to the moisture. And as I said before, even honey, when the bees are consuming that, they generate moisture and respirate and everything else inside the hive. But one of the things that you can feed that is much like honey is ProSweet. It has the same consistency of honey. It could technically be fed right into the beginnings of winter or early in the spring when we still get those cold nights. But the problem that I had with this kind of feeder is, especially if you put something heavy in it, like I would not fill this with honey, but if you put a heavy syrup in here, the tendency is for this tank to settle on this center, because look where it's supported, close to the middle. It mushrooms down a little bit and expresses the liquid in. And since most inner covers have that opening right in the center, where's your cluster? Your cluster is also right in the center. So if this thing leaks through expansion on those warm days, or if it settles and acts like a bellows and expresses liquid down there, it goes right on top of the cluster, and then it needs to be warm enough in there for the bees to consume the liquid to keep up with what's dripping until, again, this vacuum establishes itself. So that's why I came up with these little wooden shims and these little blocks and stuff. These support the tank from outside along the edges and prevent it from settling. And then the bees can continuously feed from the small openings here. The 3-season feeder is a little different on the bottom, but the principle is the same. And that lets the bees continually feed, but nothing can drown in that. So for Early Plus, it holds 1 gallon, and that would be inside your feeder shim. So the rapid round, dry or liquid, but you're going to get, some bees are going to drown for the reasons that we already talked about. The other thing is, of course, put a sock over that centerpiece, and you can keep bees out of it. So there are lots of ways to experiment with that. And I'll put a link to my video that shows don't drown your bees, different things that you can do, different styles of feeders, including water offerings outside of your hives, so that the bees can take care of that. But don't panic completely if you have a few dead bees, because it can actually be due to the fact that the bees themselves are pushing each other headlong right into the syrup, and then they just can't get out because it's relentless. This pile is in the drink, this pile's in the drink, this pile's in the drink. I've seen honeybees fall into honey, be under the surface of the honey, and even while they're completely covered, their tongue is still going in and out, and they're still drinking while they're in the honey. It's weird stuff. I mean, that's a doomed honeybee, but still drinking under the surface. It's pretty amazing. But they will drown if they're not given a way to get out. So there's a lot of room for improvement in bee feeders. So that's something, somebody looking for something to do, to design. I have ideas. I just don't have. I wrote to a company, an executive, a manager at a company here in the county where I live, and tried to get them to talk about a feeder design that I want to do, and I wanted to get them on board, and they're like, yeah, we'll do that for you. No, I don't want them to do it for me. I want them to make it. I want them to sell it, and then I'll just talk about it. I don't want to go into business and sell beekeeping equipment. I just want to talk about things that work. So now we're on to question number 5. Brad Wamsley. I'm going to purchase and broadcast a mixed bag of pollinator flower seeds around my yard, and I saw your YouTube The Way to Bee episode discussing the subject. My question is, how many square feet of the same type of flower is necessary to attract honeybees. So here's the thing, and I have two favorite sources for seeds: Ernst Seeds, and because they deal with native seeds, native plants and everything, and then Eden Brothers, of course. And I have no affiliation with these companies, so if you follow a link from me to Eden Brothers or Ernst Seeds, I get nothing out of it other than helping you find plants that are going to get your bees going. So different times of year, this is regional stuff. So what to plant? The thing is, find a plant. These are kind of the real fundamentals of it. Find a plant that produces honey and nectar at a time when the environment may not be robust in those resources. So there are a lot of things that we can do, and let's be collaborative about it if we can. So if you can, the way I try to do, I try to shame my neighbors into not killing weeds in their yards, not using weed and feed and everything else that people do just before fall to make sure that they don't get dandelions, that they don't get clover. And my questions are always the same. What's wrong with dandelions? What's wrong with clover? Clover, white clover that grows in people's lawns, first of all, is easier to mow, less strain on the mower, requires less sharpening of the blades, uses less fuel because there's less restriction as you go to mow through it, and they don't hurt your feet. So what is the problem with clover? And here's the other thing. What's the problem with dandelions? Every part of the dandelion is edible. Flower, stem, leaves, roots. They even used to sell dandelion greens, the leaves of dandelions, canned. My grandmother used to have dandelion green salads. So anyway, getting people to allow these things to exist on their property in their lawns is a boost. So that's step one. The other thing is, what you're planting, try to find out, does it produce a lot of nectar? Does it produce pollen for your bees? And can you plant enough of it to make a difference? I mean, the thinking is every little bit helps, right? But you're competing with what's going to be available in the environment at the same time that your plantings are going to bloom and offer their resources. So some of the things, by the way, I've had some things that I planted on my property, and I'm lucky to have acres that I can play with. So I planted swamp milkweeds. Swamp milkweeds are expensive, the seeds were, and I got them from Eden Brothers. And I just felt like, wow, I did all that planting of these swamp milkweeds and they didn't do anything. We even got the inside little greenhouse things with little pods and we started them, then you've got 100 little seedlings of swamp milkweed. Then you put those out in the yard only then to have them die. So I learned to plant them direct seed. And so I thought it was a loss. I thought they just didn't do diddly. And then we get out there and I'm taking pictures of some little kids because I'm a photographer. And I use my property for that. So flowers are for the bees and for kids and families and things like that. And wouldn't you know it, there's these bright orange flowers just a couple of weeks ago. And they're a couple of feet high and some are red, some are yellow. And I get close and darn if those aren't swamp milkweeds that I thought were a loss. So they're not a loss, it's a perennial. They're going to keep growing, they're going to keep expanding. And they're colorful. And look when they're blooming at a time when other stuff has already expired. So there is the swamp milkweeds. I've seen them bloom in May and June. And now we've also got them blooming at the end of the year. So that would be a target species for me because the more of them we get, the more you get the bees' attention. And then they'll use them for not pollen, but they'll use them for nectar. So milkweeds, even in their prime, there's a lot of different varieties of milkweeds. So look into that. Those are cool. They just look great. They're colorful. You can smell them. And it's the nectar that draws the bees. When the bees get pollen from milkweeds, they have these little traps built in to make sure that the bees' feet get caught in them. And then when they pull their feet out, it looks like they've got a little amber-colored flipper attached to their foot. And then there'll be another one attached to that and another one attached to that. And what it starts to look like is you've got a mutant honeybee that at the end of its feet has like 4 or 5 additional feet. It's really what they look like, and it's really strange. And when they're trying to walk around on things, these things are flopping like somebody with their shoes untied and big flippers on their feet. So that is the milkweed getting its pollen to other milkweed plants, and they trap their feet and so on. But there's some amazing natural glue going on there too, which is pretty interesting. And I know I spent a lot of time talking about that. The other thing is, aside from looking into those different milkweed varieties, because those are the most colorful ones. And who doesn't like the look of milkweed pods, by the way, at the end of the year? Just cool. The other thing is, of course, you can grow a mow-less lawn, by the way. So if you look up a no-mow yard, that kind of thing, these are low-growing plants that flower. You can't lose with things like clover, and of course the dandelions go by, so that's just an early start, but at a time when nothing else is available. So the other thing is cosmos. I grew this year, but that's not going to be for everybody because those things are huge. Cosmos plants, they were supposed to grow 4 or 5 feet. We've got easy 6-foot plants out there, but the bees were all over them. So if you've got space, you can grow a bunch of them, and guess what the cosmos do? They pushed out even plants like spreading dogbane. Spreading dogbane is a plant that takes over some of your pasture land. And so I mixed it right in with the cosmos seeds. This past year was the first time I did that. And you know, those seeds outcompeted spreading dogbane. So I think it's actually going to help me control that stuff. But they have a long bloom. So that's big bang for your buck. You get nectar and pollen from cosmos seeds. And people often write and say, well, is there a list of all the plants and their pollen quality and their nectar quality? And there is. So you can look up studies that have been done that list pollen protein content, amino acid profiles, all the stuff for different plants. And also it ranks them by their nectar production. But of course, even like goldenrod, for example, has a variety of different subspecies of goldenrod that don't produce as well as others. But see, I'm never going to plant goldenrod anyway. It doesn't matter because there's hundreds, if not thousands of acres of it where I live. But that's short-lived, relatively, see. So you have to think of things that will produce the most in a time when others are not producing, and whether or not you can concentrate enough of them to get the honeybees' attention, and then they'll use those resources. So anyway, the other thing is, like in the springtime, I grew willow trees. We have wetlands here. So that's like one of the first pollens that comes in. Maple pollen comes in. Aspen produces pollen. So things like that. But so trees, if you live on a smaller plot, consider something like a linden tree that could get really big. You don't want to plant that thing where people park their cars and where it is ultimately going to reach over your driveway because it will drip on everything. And a lot of people don't like them. Do you know why? Because they're known as bee trees. Some people are afraid of bees. And we have an uninformed public out there. So this is where you, the beekeeper, gets to share with people and teach them the difference between a bee and a wasp and a hornet and all these things, because people see a hornet's nest and they go, I have a bee's nest in my yard, I'm going to kill it. So if we can just teach people the difference between hornets and bees, beneficial, potentially negative, then we can make some strides there. Because that's why people don't want those trees. They think they're attracting all of these insects that will sting people. But for you, a vertical garden is what that is, that can provide, and for many years to come. That's the other thing, the longevity of the plants, perennials versus annuals. Cosmos are annual flowers, but they're so prolific in their seed production, and we have goldfinches here. And I can't go down in that lower meadow where we have acres of cosmos without seeing little groups of goldfinches flying everywhere and clinging to the sides of the branches and eating those cosmos seeds. So I know those birds are flying who knows where and planting these flowers for next year. So that's how they spread. Even though it's an annual, they're going to reseed and replant. I'm also going to replant them, and also next year I'm going heavy with sunflowers. Sunflowers are another showy border plant that you could put up in your yard. You can use them as a partition, and of course, even when they dry out, they make a great dry collection for Thanksgiving, for Halloween, for things like that. And so that's another thing. Sunflowers are not all the same, and again, Ernst Seeds and Eden Brothers, they all have sunflower mixes and things like that. But the pollinator I did buy, I went to Eden Brothers and I bought an expensive bag of mixed northeastern wildflower seeds. waste of my money. So I don't know what happened there. It's supposed to be a mix of annuals and perennials and stuff like that. I did see some black-eyed Susans and things, but for me it's worked out much better to select a specific species of flowering plant and then concentrate my planting of a single species rather than trying to get this beautiful multicolored, a beautiful just continual blooming of, some kind of field or yard or whatever. It didn't work for me. The other thing that's finally coming through after 2 years of being patient and walking through identifying everything, anise hyssop, Hyssop. Super fragrant. Anise oil is in there, so it's an essential oil. The bees go on those little blue blossoms that are on it, and that thing also it's been blossoming since mid-July and it still has blooms on it as of last week. So hyssop, another one, and that's a perennial. Good investment because it's going to continue, and that's what I noticed. It's doubling or tripling its density over just the past 2 years, but it was a slow starter. I thought it was just, again, a waste of seed. Nothing happened. Maybe they got 3 or 4 inches the first year, and ultimately they'll be 30 inches tall, and they'll be full of blooms, and they'll be full of a nectar that's going to add some interesting flavors to your honey, the backyard beekeeper. Anyway, we talked about that enough, but I hope I gave you some ideas. Concentrating a single source because bees are floral constant, which means as they forage on a specific plant variety at once. One thing I did notice about the cosmos, the different colored blossoms did not make a difference. They are the same species as far as the honeybee is concerned. Remember, honeybees don't see the colors the same way we do. And I've seen honeybees go from white cosmos to burgundy colored cosmos to pink cosmos. Same bee, same flight. So it is the same species, but it's a subspecies of blossom. So what we're going to get out of those is some kind of hybrid now. So the petals will be different colors. Again, might be interesting to see how things progress. Just fun there. Now for the cover shot of today's video. This question comes from Old Guy Gaming Network. I know you don't like the idea of pesticides, but specific ones like CB80 is a non-residual fogger that can kill the entire colony in seconds. After they're dead, let the box air out for 10 or 15 minutes and it's perfectly safe to introduce new bees to that box or recycle the materials. It is one of the few pesticides that is registered and authorized for use in food handling areas. Okay, extreme caution on that, and that's why I wanted to talk about this today. Old Guy Network, and this is what we're talking about here, which you can use. You can use it in your house, you can use it in your kitchen, in your pantry, in your basement, in your laundry room. Food prep places use it in those rooms and stuff, and it's all approved for them. That doesn't mean it's safe for bugs. And of course, it's a pesticide. But what I did was, I love both of these, right? Both of these will kill honeybees. And the question might be, why the heck would you be killing honeybees? This is when you have a colony that just has an attitude change. They freak out and they start stinging everything. And you can't have them around. So you have to be able to euthanize the colony. And if you've made a decision to euthanize a colony, then you're going to have to do that in the most expedient way possible. So, the other thing is I want to consider the cost of this. Will this immediately knock down bees, wasps, hornets, or other things? Or according to the write-up, it will. I mean, I bought it to learn about it, right? This 17-ounce can, which is exactly what this is, comes from Amazon, and it will cost you $27.51 on sale. And I absolutely cannot vouch for whether or not this would be harmless to bees as described here, to where you can reoccupy that colony with a brand new colony of bees right away. I'm not personally comfortable with that until I did a lot more research. It's a pyrethrin. So there's deltamethrin and all these others that I know about. I would not be putting that inside a hive that I wanted to reoccupy with other bees. If somebody's got an actual study that shows and claims that this is safe to be reoccupied by insects, which are the target species, then would that change my mind? No. and I'll tell you why. Dawn Free and Clear. There's a lot of reasons why this is good stuff. First of all, what does it cost? Also, I checked the pricing on Amazon. 16 ounces. How many ounces is this? This is 24 ounces right here, but a 16-ounce bottle of it costs $9.15 with free shipping if you're a Prime member, right? But the other thing is, this, you use it all up when you attack your colony that's gone rogue and is trying to kill everything. But you can go in here, and how much of this do you use? You use 1 to 2 tablespoons of Dawn Ultra Free and Clear. It even says 50% less scrubbing. You won't be scrubbing your bees though, so it doesn't matter. But 1 to 2 tablespoons makes a gallon of this. Now here's the other thing. You can get those 1 gallon, 2 gallon garden sprayers, and you pump them up, you get the little wand that you have a spray. That should be in your emergency kit, right? And you can pre-mix this stuff in that and have it sitting in your bee shed as part of your emergency response kit. If you're in an area where Africanized bees are an issue and you could suffer usurpation, which is when an Africanized colony shows up, their scouts and everything move right into a colony, they actually force their way in, they kill the queen, and their queen takes it over, and they assume and keep all the resources in the colony, and you don't even know necessarily that it's happened until you start to get some strong responses from them that you otherwise would not have expected from that particular colony. And if they've been there long enough, ultimately she's reproducing her own, and then you have a hive out of control, so it might have to be euthanized if it did. If it's a really hot day, I put an industrial black trash bag around the whole thing and just heat them up and kill them. That's how bees kill a queen when they don't want her. They make a ball around her, they raise her body temperature, they kill the queen with heat. That is the most non-destructive method of euthanizing a colony, with heat. But you might not have the temperatures available. You might have a situation where you have to do something right away. That's why that garden sprayer, when you pump it up, adjust the nozzle so you get the fine spray, not a stream, because you want the fine spray because it makes it foam more. And what happens is you're going to see honeybees drop immediately when they come in contact. Dawn Ultra Free and Clear is not harmful to your environment. So like where I live, we live on wells and stuff. We don't want our groundwater polluted. We don't want to have problems. So this actually would be safe for that. The other thing is, when you get the foam and it sprays on the bees, honeybees have a protective cuticle on their bodies. It is like a waxy protectant, which is why bees can go through the rain and the raindrops drip on them. They flip their wings and the rain flips off, and it doesn't soak into them and it doesn't drown the bee, right? But what that stuff does is defeats the cuticle. It has a wetting agent that allows it to seep into their spiracles and everything else, so it actually suffocates the bees very fast. So that's why you want your nozzle on that spray pattern, because you want it to foam a lot. Just like if you went to your kitchen sink and if you just took water as a solid stream and filled the basin that already has water, even if it has soap in it, it doesn't soap up. But if you go to your vegetable sprayer, now you're mixing air with it when you hit it and you've got a higher velocity, now you've got a lot of bubbles and a lot of foam. That's what you're doing inside the beehive that you have to take emergency action on. Every honeybee that stuff hits will be down and out. So if you had a choice, personally, for me, between this one and this one, this is it, because it has a bunch of other uses too. Not just killing bees. I mean, because let's face it, how many of you are actually going to have to euthanize a colony someday? Most of you never will. I've only had to do that once, and it wasn't my colony of bees. Because when people have problems with wasps, hornets, or bees, I'll come and take care of them for them, because I get to learn about them in the process. I get to find out what's going on, how they're situated, what species it is, what they're doing, and then I wait for them to attack me, and then I see what happens after that. But for me, Dawn Ultra Free and Clear, always. Works right away, can be pre-mixed, can be staged, can be sitting there, ready to go. You need an emergency kit, kind of ready to go. Question number 7 is from Stan Dollar. That's interesting. Could you comment on the logistics of finding new areas to put hives? For example, what kind of arrangements are normally made between beekeepers and landowners? This is assuming no crop money is involved and one is just looking for another good area to keep hives. Do beekeepers pay landowners? Do you offer honey, etc.? Okay, here's the thing. And there's legal issues with this, by the way. Because you might be thinking, you got a friend, like let's say you live in the city. Because somebody recently even said this to me. Yeah, I've got land out here, and it'd be cool if some beekeeper just wanted to come and put their hives out here and just have them there. They're fine to use my land. So I'm going to advise you, first of all, you go to your state beekeeper organization if you have one. And if you have that, look for your local or regional beekeepers association. And because the president of that association understands legal issues that often are presented to the club and its members. Some of that can come from where can you keep bees and what are the regulations about keeping bees there. Now you might think, well, it's a farm area. I'm just going to go ahead and put my hives out there. You'd be amazed at how, if something goes wrong with those hives, some Amish buggy goes by there, and the bees fly out and sting that horse, and that horse runs and gets that out of control. Not everybody has Amish people where they live. We do in here. But I'm just saying your bees can do things that are not under your control because you're the one that's put them out there, though. They belong to you, so now you're accountable for what they do, weird as that is. And they could cause harm, and you could end up in a lawsuit. So you want to make sure that you've got some kind of write-up, some kind of agreement that someone with legal training can look over and say, yeah, that protects you. You kind of want to be protected when you're putting your bees somewhere. The other thing is you find out that bees on your own property may require insurance. So you call your homeowner's insurance policy representative and you find out, hey, I'm keeping a couple of honeybees, a couple of colonies in my yard. Does that bump up my insurance? My insurance company is not going to charge me extra for even the 21 colonies of bees that I keep right now. They said that will change when you start teaching about bees on your property. That's when now we have to talk about what it's going to cost me. So it's actually going to be an expensive venture to have the Way to Bee Academy, which I'm okay with. I would end up paying for that. But you want to make sure that you've got some kind of paper, something written, something that, first of all, gives you permission to have your stuff there. And number two, who's liable for what happens there? And as far as if they want to pay you for pollination or something like that, or if you want to give them honey because you're going to get something out of it, that should also probably be in writing. It just makes it easier. And if you ever end up in small claims court, you've got some agreement written down. But I can't give advice on that directly, of course. That's why I'm sending you to your local bee club or your state bee club, who probably has a form already ready for you that all you have to do is change the fields and put your name, the landowner's name, and stuff like that. Most bee clubs have that worked out. Question number 8 from Matthew. Hi, Fred. I know you addressed the tray question about the Flow Hive 2. But the tray for the Flow Hive 2 Plus has been changed a bit. Does not have a flat bottom as the older one did. So, do I still flip the tray? So here's what we're talking about. This is a 10 frame Langstroth size tray. It goes in the Flow Hive 7 frame. I know that's confusing. Flow Hive makes a 7 frame Super which matches a 10 frame bottom box standard Langstroth. They also make a 6 frame Super which matches the 8 frame deep box. And inside the Flow Hive 2, which those are the ones with the fancy bottoms, and then some of them have the threaded feet on them so they can all be adjusted and everything. And I've always said, when you look at this, see how all these edges are square, they're 90 degrees to the bottom. Where this was designed, where the invention happened in New South Wales, Australia, they don't get freezing temps like we do. So what happened was, water comes in through the entrance, because this is the back part where you would pull it out, and there's a piece of wood that holds it in there. Water builds up in here because snow builds up in the front, or you get driving rain, you get blowing winds and stuff, which is a very common occurrence here where I live. Water gets down in here, next thing you know, it's freezing. Where's the cluster? The cluster of the bees are way up here. Nothing is going to warm this area because the bottom of this is to the outside. Above it is a screen. Through the screen falls different bits and pieces of debris from inside the hive. Little varroa hopefully will get down in here and drown and die right away. But the liquids down here freeze and can crack this stuff out. It's really rigid. The other thing is we don't want moisture accumulating down here in the wintertime when the bees can't vent it out and get rid of it. So we always say pull it out, push it back in, and now you have this flat bottom, so any moisture that accumulates in winter now runs off, doesn't stay, and of course won't crack this out and ruin it. What I don't have in hand is the FlowHive 2 Plus, which has the aluminum feet and all that stuff, and it has a new tray design, and the new tray design is a good one. It's also tougher. It didn't crack and everything. So, but what it has are dish-shaped reservoirs. So they have these nice radii in there. So what happens is if you get water in there and it freezes and it starts to expand, it'll just move up, see? Because if it were a straight 90, now we have a stress point, can crack it out when the ice expands, but because it's shaped differently, it just pushes up and out. So no, you don't have to flip it upside down, because when you flip it upside down, guess what else? All around the perimeter, it's a tray again and it will hold moisture. So keep it right side up, but add it to your weekly 1R. And that means every week you get out there with your quarterly 3M schedule and you pull that tray out and you clean it. Oh, what do you clean it with? This is your dead bee scraper, which comes from Bee Smart Designs that we talked about the last time, and everybody's like, hey, I can't find it, where can I get one of those? Well, it was being offered as a free gift when people were buying that insulated cover. But what this works for is scraping out your bottom boards or scraping off your insert trays or things like that. It also, as designed, is supposed to be used to scrape away snow from the entrance of your hive. And then you take the hook part and you put it in there and you go all the way to the back and you scoop out dead bees through the opening. And these are $4 and change at betterbee.com right now. So they are selling them. See, I knew they would. But now this can be used to scrape out your trays, scrape snow off for those of you in the north, but also it scrapes out dead bees, and you can reach, look how far into the hive you can get with it, and then you scrape out dead bees. And for a lot of people that I've talked with recently, the idea of scraping out dead bees during winter was new to them. That's why I'm talking about it again. Yes, write it on your whiteboard, put a sticky on your refrigerator, whatever you need to do. Every single time it snows, or whenever you're going to walk outside or get near where your beehives are, have a tool of some kind to get out there and scrape them out. I also use kebab sticks. Before Bee Smart Designs made that, these are kebab sticks. I just get in there, put them together like chopsticks and sweep out dead bees. But of course I can only reach this far back, and with one of these you can reach, look how much farther in. The more dead bee bodies you get out of there, the less moisture they're contending with, and the fewer dead bees they have to clean out themselves. So there's that. So it doesn't have flat bottom, the older one, so do you still flip it? You don't have to flip it. The new tray is better. Way better. In fact, I wish they would just go ahead and sell them. Do they sell them separate, if somebody knows? Honeyflow is the website. Anyway. Question number 9, Anthony Hurt, Ohio, USA. Hi Fred, I'm in my first year of beekeeping and I have 2 hives with telescoping tops. I've taken your advice and insulated the tops and noticed more consistent temperatures inside via the Govee meters. I've never heard of those, by the way, so if somebody has a link. By the way, if somebody posts a link in a comment below one of my videos, it looks like it disappears. It doesn't disappear. It goes into holding, because any kind of link or to another video, to another website, things like that, has to be screened first, then it gets released, assuming it's applicable and suitable and not spammy or something like that. So don't flip out if you put a link down. But I'd love to get a link about the Govee meters. So thanks. I'll be adding 2 additional hives next year, and they have gabled hive tops with air vents. What are your thoughts on gabled hive vents? Should I close off the air vents and insulate similar to telescoping tops, or buy an intimate top cover and keep the gabled hive tops for aesthetics? Thank you. Okay, so here's the thing. I love those gabled hives, by the way, and they're super expensive. I have racks of them because they couldn't be insulated very well. We're talking about, see the gabled lid right back there on that flow hive? What we need is above the box, I need a shim big enough to accommodate some kind of feeder and then insulation underneath that gable top. And if it's vented at the top above, the insulation that's on the inner cover and stuff like that, that's fine. But we need insulation on the top of our hives. And if you can find a way to configure that, you're going to have to do some woodworking. Beekeepers with woodworking skills and any kind of small wood shop, if it's in your basement, your garage, or whatever, you're way ahead because you can make these modifications. I'm way behind because I just don't have time to do stuff. But I actually have bought extra boxes for my flow hives because they don't make a medium super. So guess what my plan's going to be? I have these deep hive boxes that match the flow hives because it's like buying extra brood boxes. They sell them as brood boxes, but you can only get the deep. So here's my plan. Put the deep box together, glue it all up, use no screws. Take the top part of that because it's got the rabbets cut out for your frames, right? And then you measure it to match your standard medium box. And you take that on the table saw and you cut that box. Now I just made a medium box out of the flow hive stock, so it matches everything perfectly. There's no more of this mismatched dimensions on the outside. And then guess what I do with the extra piece? Now that extra piece is a feeder shim that the gabled roof matches, and you can put your R10 insulation board in that, and you can have your feeder on it, whatever you want, and you can still keep your gabled board with the vent. But my practice now is not to allow air to move from inside the hive through the top out some kind of vent. I don't care how slow it moves. I don't have it at all. I did it last year. We insulated. See, last year was not as good as this year already. And interesting things are already happening with the temperature that changed. Because what did I do? There's enough science, see. So like, oh, Fred, well, you have to have controls, you have to do with and without and all this other stuff. Well, I don't in this case because the science is already pretty good. So I have nothing to prove on whether or not it's beneficial to the bees to have insulation directly over the bees on the top box. So instead of the normal inner cover, which has no insulation on it at all, it's just a thin piece of wood, sometimes it's Luan, has the opening in the middle, which, by the way, that opening was designed to be a bee escape. It's not designed for venting or anything like that initially. So we have this, and I put them on all my Langstroth style boxes. And we were out there, was it yesterday? Yeah, just yesterday, with a thermal camera. Now this is interesting. Even though they normally this time of year would be down in the brood box because they were almost honeybound going into the fall. Now we took a thermal camera out because this time of year it's very easy to see where the clusters are, who's got the biggest cluster, who's generating the most heat, and all that other stuff. But all of them have insulated inner covers on them now, where before we had the inner cover, we had a feeder shim, we had the outer cover, which are the B-Max insulated top covers. But you see the space? There was an upper feeder shim and the normal inner covers down here, including my feeder shims that I used to make, with the built-in inner cover in them. Those seemed great, but the insulation was at the top of it, not underneath. So the insulated inner cover put that insulation directly over the bees. Guess where all the clusters are? Most of them. They're already way up, intimately engaged with the underside of these Bee Smart inner insulated covers right up against this plastic here. So what they've done is they've abandoned the lower area where normally they would migrate slowly through the food and eat the honey on their way up through winter. And then by spring, by February, whatever, your clusters are at the top. And I have to feed those because they're already up there. Well, now they've already moved up there, even though all their feed is down below. Why? Because it's a warm space and they know it and they're using it. So they prematurely shot up there. So what does that mean for the bees? I don't know. It means that they might stay up there, exhaust the resources immediately around them, but here's the key though. They would eat fewer resources or they would consume what was there at a lower rate. Why? Because their metabolism is slowed down because they're in an area where they're warmer than they had been in years past. This is what I'm thinking is happening. But I'm going to have to make darn sure that there's food available inside, and that's this other video that I mentioned earlier today that I'm going to put out. It shows how I manage that feeder box. It's got the insulator cover underneath, and I'm insulating that and then insulating that and then having food inside that's available in an insulated space. See what happens. Lots of good stuff going on right now. But yeah, keep the telescoping lid if you can make a shim to raise it up to accommodate insulation underneath of it. It's just like your house. I hear people, by the way, misdescribe the way a house is built and insulated and vented. Sometimes you'll see a forum or hear a discussion where someone will say, I'm a home inspector. And they'll say, and you got to vent your soffits. You got to vent your attic. You have to have air movement up there. And what I say to that is, I'm a home inspector too. That's right. Years ago, I became a home inspector so I could learn about homes to see what would fail, what was good, what was bad in building practice before I designed and built my own home. I built this house myself. I designed it myself. But that description of venting is flawed. Sorry to say. And that's because we don't vent our house. Like the rooms that we live in, the vents are not in the ceiling. When you go to the upper floor of a multi-storied house, you have a vapor barrier, you've got sheetrock on the overhead, and you've got insulation directly over that, much like that inner cover right there. Outside of the insulation, you have an airspace in the attic. Hip roof, gabled roof, mansard roof, whatever kind of roof it is, you've got an airspace up there that's not heated. So we can't let warm heat rise. Where does it rise through your house? It gets away through your fixtures like your ceiling lights and things like that. Gets into the walls sometimes, goes up the wall plate, openings through where you have light switches, especially on your outside walls. Older structures, balloon-built homes. Warm air rises and they're not platform built the way they are now, so there's nothing to stop the air from rising, getting into the attic, and that could form condensation on the cold interior surface of your attic roof sheathing. That's not where the people live. That's why that area has to be vented. That's where your soffit vents go. They follow along the interior surface of that sheathing and they prevent ice buildup, and then you don't get black mold and things like that, and your roof sheathing lasts much longer. That has nothing to do with the insulation in the part of the house that you inhabit. You're not venting out of your house through the top. You're not. So when you hear those arguments and people describe it, well, that's the way homes are and they get vented through the top, I'm sorry to say they really don't. So the venting through the top is to prevent ice damming on your... I used to take my kids and we look at houses in wintertime, go see that house with all the snow all over the roof and it's not melting off. That house has really good insulation on it. And it's not because the roof itself would have otherwise been heated, but the other thing is, then you see a house that's got these patchy melt-off areas on it. When all the houses next door to it have a nice load of snow that's nice and even, the one that's got the melty patches and the big icicles on it, we know that the inside of that house is not well insulated because it's leaking warm air, which causes condensation on the interior of the surface of that roof sheathing. And then we have an ice melt, and then it freezes again at night when it gets really cold, and then you have ice damming that gets underneath your shingles and things like that, and big old icicles. That's a lack of venting and stuff, and a lack of insulation on the interior portion of the home. That's what we're doing with the beehive. We're keeping the interior insulated, and we're not letting warm air escape and then condense up underneath these gabled roofs and things like that. But then it would need to be vented if you weren't holding the air in. I hope that is a decent explanation. But those things are not the same at all. Vent a house to protect the roof is not the same as venting a hive to get rid of warm air. You don't want to let that air out. You don't want to let the air out of your people part of your house either. Okay, so yeah, that's what you can do. Get an extra box, free flow hive people, glue it up, cut it, make a medium, which they don't sell, and then use the surplus for your feeder shim. Now you've got insulation, and you can still keep your gabled roof if you want it. Question number 10, Nancy Kassler. It's my first winter with bees. I'm in Albany, New York, Zone 5B, where we just had our first frost of the season. I have 2 hives, which I insulated yesterday according to Bill Hesbach's recommendations. So I don't know who Bill is, but okay. I have no upper entrance. My screen bottom inserts are pushed almost all the way in. I have the larger entrance reducer opening in place along with hardware cloth in case a mouse decides to try to nibble its way in. I'd like to know how much ventilation to allow during winter. I know some people leave the entire width of the bottom entrance open. What do you recommend I do with my screened bottom inserts and the bottom entrance to provide adequate ventilation to my setup? Screened bottom inserts, by the way, most of them have summer settings. That's the low and open one. Then you can pull it out, slide it in, and then there's a winter setting that closes it up right underneath the screen. So you would pull your screen insert out, that little catch board that's underneath. Usually it's core flute, whatever you want to call it, the stuff that like political campaign yard signs are made out of. Which, by the way, go and get a bunch of those now that elections are over with and cut them up and use them for your bee bottom boards. And then you slide it into the upper one to close down the ventilation up through the screen bottom board in wintertime. And in the entrance, you don't need, if you can close your entrance down to 3/8 inch in height and 3 inches or less in width, that to me is optimum for any size colony in winter. And you don't need the hardware cloth for the mouse guard, because the mice are not getting through that 3/8 inch height. We tested it, we proved it, they don't get through. And my ongoing tests on that still, the mice don't get through. And so that's what I recommend on that. Take your insert out, put it in the uppermost position, and then reduce your entrance to 3/8 by 3 inches or smaller if you have a smaller colony. So I hope that works. Here's question number 11 from Pam. Carpinteria, California. I've never heard of that before. Got a flow hive in July and it was doing very well, but the last time I opened it, the queen was gone and the brood was almost gone. Tough time of year for that stuff to happen. And then I thought I would get another nuke or queen, but I can't find one anywhere right now. Do I just have to let all those wonderful bees die? Is there anything else I can do? Well, if you've this time of year, especially for those of you who only have one colony of bees, if you've lost your queen, they're going to die. So, but here's what I want to say that should probably bring you some comfort. You know, when you've got a colony of bees and you're like, should I just let them die? You know, you're not just letting them die, first of all. You're letting the bees that are occupying that colony that no longer has a queen, they're just going to live out their normal life. Whatever's left, and so you could feed them, you can do anything you want to keep them going. They're going to live the normal length of life there, and then they're going to die. They're going to fly away and not come back, and ultimately they'll dwindle. And so it's not like they're suffering or that you've done something bad to them. This happens to bee colonies, feral colonies, or those under your control, when they have no way to make new brood. And the only brood that they could make now would be drones, of course, because if they got laying workers, they would start to lay drones, like lay haploid eggs, you know, infertile eggs that would produce only a male bee, and then all they do is consume their resources, and then they just run out of time. So they finish off their life. Or the cluster gets so small and it gets so cold, but given where this is located, they're probably not going to die of the cold. They just live out their life and don't make it. You might think, you know, because people, especially new beekeepers and people that just love animals and everything, and they're thinking, well, I just want to do something with them, and maybe somebody else will take them. So here's what I advise to those of you who have somebody that says, you know, I lost my queen, it's too late in the year, can I give them to you? We just combine them to your colony and that kind of thing. I highly advise that you don't do that. If they're not from your bee yard and you don't know the history of those bees, you don't know what diseases, you may not understand yet why the queen even is gone. Why are they queenless? Why are they dwindling? What's wrong with the colony? Especially with new beekeepers, there may be a lot of things going on with the colony that they're unaware of as to why it's perishing. So don't take those over to your friend's house and give them to them to fortify an existing colony that they have. I just highly recommend that you just let them live out their lives and do the best for them that you can while you can. And then in the following year, in the spring, clean everything up, sanitize the things that require sanitization, and start over in spring. So, but don't feel bad. It's the bees are just in that situation on their own. It's not necessarily your fault. We have a beekeeper in our bee organization here that lost 6 out of 7 queens. Yeah, so 6 out of 7 colonies lost their queens going into fall, after that fall nectar flow. So when a queen's gone and it's too late in the year and you can't replace them, now those all belong to that person. So they could certainly combine and fortify and do things like that. And maybe somebody in the club has an extra queen and things like that. And it's all local and you can just get things going. But in the absence of your ability to bring in a fertile queen, so you could do that last check, see if anybody has a laying queen, because a lot of them, maybe because it was only within the last couple of weeks here that people that produce and sell mated queens stopped. Maybe in California, there's some people that are still doing that, and you could feasibly install a new queen in that colony and save them. So question number 12. This is from Rebecca, Victoria, Australia. 4 days ago, my hive swarmed. I extracted 3 flow frames over 2 days, 2 on the same of the swarming and 1 the following. I removed the whiteboard and replaced a new one 4 days on. Those bees will not go back in the hive, clustering around the front. I know the bees go out if it's flooded, but there's no sign of honey dripping on the whiteboard, and can see the cells filling again with the removal of the swarm queen. Could this be the problem? Any advice? Okay, so here's the thing. When you have these flow hives, like this one back here, if you cycle the frames and drain the honey out before they're capped with wax, I'm just covering this, not necessarily pertinent to this specific question, but to explain why sometimes the honey drips down the face of those frames and into the hive on the brood below. And this causes your bees to move out. And that's a very popular video that I did in 2016, showing what happens when you cycle a bunch of frames at once. So then the bees go out, but as described here, the honey didn't drip down, but the bees moved out. Now they're gathered on the front of the hive, even though there is work going on inside, and some of the cells are being filled up again with nectar, and so they're making honey still. So what happened though is when you cycled your frames, the humidity inside that hive, I don't know the climate here in this part of Australia, but what happens is you did a dramatic increase of humidity, because remember, all the surfaces of those cells, even though drained, they're wet, it's exposed, and there's a lot of humidity potentially that fills the colony and has to be vented out. So just like when there's a big nectar flow on, you get a bunch of bees bearding on the front of the hive. And a lot of people that are new to beekeeping are like, is something going on with my bees? What's going on? They're all in the front of the hive, But you can smell the honey in the air, and there's a lot of humidity and a lot of heat. And so those bees are just getting themselves out of the way so the bees inside can be working and restoring them. Because they have to clean up all the cells, they have to clean up the frames, and they will go right back to work resealing the joints, because remember, we cycled them, so we broke those wax seals, and now we've put it back together. That's the other thing I want to recommend, that you do a double take and make sure that you've cycled all those frames and they are firmly back together and sealed up. So now they can work them again. And so the cells are closed, but it's normal for the bees to move out with that increased humidity that happened because they're also uncapping the cells now and they have to rework everything. So there's higher humidity in the hive. It's not just because some of the honey could drip to the bottom. That's one reason they certainly move out, because of that, because the honey drips all over them. But just opening and cycling the hives puts a lot of moisture, a lot of vapor in the air, and so that's what I think is going on. So I hope you'll update us when they all move right back in, which probably by now they have, because it's already Saturday today in Australia. So, and they're going into, isn't that great that they're going into summer right now, and here we are getting hit with winter storms. So number 13, Jason from Florida. Did an inspection today, 3 November. No eggs or larvae, but there are queen cells. 1 they're feeding, 1 capped, and 1 open on the side. I always have trouble finding the queen, but I think the old queen is gone. No local mated queens remaining, and I'm concerned about any new queen mating this year. I have a nuke that has a laying queen, thinking of combining them using your newspaper method. So, since I have trouble locating the queen, what's a good way to combine them, lowering the risk of the two queens in the hive? So the risks are actually pretty low. So here's what you want to do. Since it's too late in the year, I mean, I don't know when the season ends in Florida and everything, but if you want to combine them, you can sure do it. So here's what I would do, personally. There's more than one way to combine a hive. But you have this nucleus colony that has a laying queen, and they're healthy and doing well. So you can combine them in the newsprint method. You'll take your strongest colony. Now, if it happens to be the nucleus colony, because you have to put them in the bigger box now, because you've got I think it's a 10 frame. We want to pull the frames that are not full of resources from your existing hive, and we want to fill those with the frames that are full. So go for frame quality. So the best quality frames with the most resources on them, the most bees on them, stuff like that. Replace the lesser populated and less complete frames that are in the hive. And you're going to put your newsprint, and the newsprint I use doesn't have newsprint on it. It's just the paper. And we put that across the top, and we cut little holes in it, and you can spritz it with sugar water if you want and stuff like that. A weaker colony goes on top. And then some people provide a back entrance and things like that for the box that they put on top so the other colony can come and go and everything else. Again, I don't do that either. What I do is I just cut the little holes. The other thing is, before I do the combining, I would go ahead and kill, squish, remove all of the queen cells that are in there. Verify you don't have a queen in there. And you want to give them about 24 hours and then put the other box right on top. I've had very good luck with that. And bees that are queenless are very accepting of a colony that has an overwhelmingly established queen pheromone. So her queen mandibular pheromone is already there, present through a lot of brood and things like that. They tend to not fight very much, and those transitions can happen very fast. So yeah, I wouldn't hesitate to do that. So in combining frames and things like that, and I hope you'll update us on how well that went. So I made my own notes here. Combine them, pull frames, swap the best with the worst, newsprint, smash queens, and give them about 24 hours after you remove those queen cells. And then, yeah, I would combine them. And there's the benefit of having more than one colony of bees, by the way, because now you're losing a colony, you don't have a queen, you don't have eggs and things like that. And you get a chance to give them a new life within your own apiary by combining one that's still making it that does have a queen and everything. So, good move. Good question, by the way. Question number 14, last one of the day. This comes from Bat Tariq. I'm a hobby beekeeper. Last year I had 32 colonies. And this spring the count went to 65, including 5 swarms. Maximum of colonies were 10 frames full of bees, while some of them were 6 to 8 frames of bees. We had the worst fall flow this year, and we have run out of time to feed liquid sugar, and now we're feeding dry sugar. We grind the sugar until it's fine as flour, then we add very little water, then we make bricks out of it and feed it. Now my question is, what can we do to improve the health of the bees as to prevent dysentery? Okay, well, first of all, what's dysentery? So your bees, here in the Northeast, it's getting cold, they're going to be confined, and they can't fly, and they can't eliminate. So I've often said, oh, bees can hold on board, as much resources as they can. They hold it in their midgut, then it makes its way to the hindgut, and then they can carry a little over 30% of their body weight in their hindgut, and they're waiting in there. They need to go to the bathroom really bad, but they don't soil the hive. So they need to wait for a warm enough day. So bees will fly out in the 50s easily. They do a lot of foraging in the 60s. And but they get out and eliminate. So they do that in the wintertime too. So dysentery, diarrhea. So are there things that help them with that? Well, this is where it gets into what are you feeding your bees in wintertime, and why don't we feed liquid in wintertime? And that's because we don't want them to end up with a bunch of stuff in their gut. And bees, by the way, they build a lot of moisture Their kind of explosion limit, and believe it or not, that's been studied, when they hit the 45% of their body weight with stored moisture and waste material, that's when they just can't hold it anymore and they have bee diarrhea right inside the hive. That's also what you see when they immediately fly out. They barely clear you'll see the entrance just painted with bee poo. Yeah, bee scat, it's everywhere. And that's because there weren't enough cleansing flight opportunities for the bees, or they're sick, or they've got a food resource in there that's so heavy in minerals and things like that. So something like this was explained in a seminar one time, that the darker the honey, the more mineral content, the more materials in it, and therefore the more frequently your bees are going to need to get out to eliminate. So the clearer, the lighter colored the honey, the less materials in it, and then of course your bees can do much better with that. And then we're talking about the sugar brick that was made here. So what prevents dysentery? What can be used? And Nosema is kind of synonymous with dysentery, but Nosema is known to attack the bee gut, right? So we know that there's one thing for sure, that studies were done on it. We had to do papers on this stuff, and that's how I know that it works, and we had to look at the science. So whenever you have somebody offering a supplement, whatever it is, and if they say it treats a condition in honeybees, immediately go to scientific paper publications to find out. And if you can't find one, write to the company and say, what studies were done and where can we read about them? So Hive Alive was the one that we found. I won't name the other ones that these are master beekeeper candidates. We all had to do research papers and we had to look up different essential oil mixtures and things that were designed to boost the bees and stuff like that. We had to find validating science for those things. And the one that came out strong was Hive Alive. This stuff is not cheap. It's expensive. And but it's proven to work. And it works on dysentery, but it works on Nosema specifically. And papers were published about it. That's why I'm comfortable telling people adding that, and it's a very small amount of that. It's like half a teaspoon per pint of sugar syrup. But what's going on right now? You can't put sugar syrup out there. So if it's too late, if you haven't been giving that, so in your fall feeding, when I have a colony that looks weak or whatever, I put the half a teaspoon. Oh yeah, I even wrote it on here. Half a teaspoon per liter. Wrote it right on the bottle. Half a teaspoon per liter to help with the bee gut. So, and I have a small, if I only have 21 colonies, I don't have a huge test group, so you have to do this over a period of years, and then you identify in your records which ones get Hive Alive and which ones don't. But now what do? Now we're at the solid feed portion. Well, this is pretty good because I went to Hive Alive about it. Not meaning that I went and said, hey guys, what do you got for bees in winter? No, I just happened to look up Hive Alive because I wanted to reinforce that the studies were done and that they were valid and all of that stuff. But then I found out that they have Hive Alive Fondant, and it just came out this year. So fondant is something I talk people out of a lot when they're new beekeepers. Why? Because you risk your cooking parameters getting too hot and creating a toxic resource for the bees. But if it comes from a company like Mann Lake, or, if you've got the companies that are actually making the products, they have a long history, and they do fondant, and they sell it, and it's good, and it's not toxic to the bees, this is the good thing. Hive Alive is producing their own fondant now, and it doesn't cost an arm and a leg. So that made me happy. I thought I wrote down the prices here. So what I did, actually, because while I was researching this question, because that's what I do before I give answers, I make sure I check my notes, my history, look up new information if there is any, and so that's what I did here. And so they have Hive Alive Fondant, which means it's going to have the same seaweed extracts and stuff that's in this. They even have temperature parameters for storing it. But I went to their website and bought a bunch of it today. Yep. So now I'm going to have the Hive Alive Fondant, I think it was... Anyway, I'll put a link to it. You can read it on their website and see what's in it. But it's got Hive Alive in it, fondant, ready to go, in packs that you can put directly on the frames so that your bees can eat it going into winter. Because I have a colony right now. We all know who they are. Hive number 7. They're still alive, by the way. When we were doing our thermal scans, Hive 7's alive. They have a heat imprint. They're in there. But their colony is light. The physical structure, the hive is light. You tip it, it's just probably the weight of the bees in there. So I can't get that fondant quick enough to get it on that hive because I know the Hive Alive works. But this, I guess, I don't have any published science. I don't have anything about their Hive Alive fondant winter patties. But I'm going to put them on there just based on the history of the company. I'm going to put those in there and see if I can't get number 7 right through winter. So that's it. And by the way, let's see, what else do we have? That's it. So you can listen to this as a podcast. I know you're already at the end of it, so what does it matter? The other thing is we have the Way to Bee Fellowship of Backyard Beekeepers on Facebook. We also have the HiveGate, which we talk about all the time, but the HiveGate Citizen Science Group, which is a small group of people. It's less than 200 people also on the Facebook group, and I'll put the links down below. But they're giving away 2 gift packages from this company. Every week we have a drawing from those 2 groups. So you have to go to one of those 2 groups if you want one, and these ship out of New Zealand. So that's pretty much it. I think that's all the information I have. Get ready. If you're in this part of the country, you're going to have a last opportunity because the temperature is going to warm up again. It's going to hit the 50s and the 60s. And I did observations over the past couple of weeks to see how soon in the day bees start foraging, what temperatures they forage at, and what liquid temperatures they would take in. And the magic number is 50 to 51 degrees. So that little parameter there, they're foraging, they're getting nectar, and they're getting resources and getting back to their hives. So that was interesting. Now, the numbers of foragers really crank up as you get the high 50s, 60s, and of course when the sun shines and the temperatures are out there. So I have a bunch of time-lapsed cameras with battery packs so they can run all day long. And then we put thermometers next to them so that we can see when the bees start showing up what was the temperature. And those thermometers have to be in the shade, of course, so we're not counting the sun itself. See? So there can be a time code too, so that then we can see what the weather station says about what the temperatures are for the bees to forage. So that's kind of interesting, just for fun. And don't forget to watch for a short video that I'm going to put out on how I use expansion foam inside the medium super, which sits on the Bee Smart inner cover, and how I made a little shape for the rapid round feeder, so that's all going to be nested in there. And what hive do you think I'm going to put that on during the warm weather break? Hopefully Hive 7. So thanks for watching. I'm glad you were here today, and I hope you have a fantastic weekend with your bees.